announcement that we are now recording. So let's see. We are all here. At least 8 of us are here. Kara, you seem to have not dropped off so far. You were struggling the last couple of weeks with dropping on and off. And so I'm glad to see that you are so far internet stable. But that's good for that. So I will just close that out so I can get the full picture of our page. And I'm realizing that the title of my slide, I forgot. Oh, no, I know the title of the slide is right. Good. I've gone ahead and changed a couple of things. I realized after last week that my week 3 presentation slides actually were my old version because, again, you get what you get with Ms. Westcott. So we actually got as far as I intended to get last week, and everything else in the rest of those slides I have taken out for next year because they were already in this week's slides. And after last year, I realized that it needed to be 2 weeks. So here we are. So let's talk about the arc of where we've been and where we're going. We have now spent the last 3 weeks talking about some of the foundations of wealth building, of money, of the moral perspective of money, of the history, a basic history of money, of the concept of what actually is money as a medium of exchange, and why can we not use Andrew bucks to be able to buy and sell groceries, and why is barter not the most efficient way to exchange goods and services and pay for goods and services. And what I forgot to show you last week is my little stash here of coins. You see here, I've got a 1922 silver dollar. This 1922 silver dollar, of course, if I were to go to the grocery store, I could buy $1 worth of stuff for it. The reality, however, is that this silver dollar is worth something like $40 because it still has real silver in it. And after 1965, 3, somewhere in there, when you take my economics class, you'll remember the date. The U.S. government started making coins without actual silver in them, or very little silver in them. And so, if I'm going to go to the store, I could use a dollar bill in exchange for a dollar bill that really has no intrinsic value. Or I wouldn't use this. That's why I save it, because I can only buy $1 worth of stuff with it if I try and exchange it for a loaf of bread. However, it's got enough silver in it that if we melted it down, or if we save it until it's an antique, it's worth 40 something dollars, I think, $41. And I have a couple of them. This one here is also a 1922. I've got one here, and this one here, it's a pretty one. I don't know if you can see it at all, but that is it's more recent, 1997, but it's specifically made, as a dollar. I don't think that has much value. And I got one here, but I also wanted to show you somewhere here. Nope. I don't have it. Never fails. Somewhere around I have a widow's mite, and I wanted you to see my widow's mite, but apparently that is not in the same stash of coins. But I do have here's a little Liberty gold dollar. I think that's really kind of interesting, right? So that, of course, because it has real gold, actually has some value to it as well, more than just the dollar. And this one here is an example. This was a Roman coin that has been found and collected. So when we talk about the thalers and the exchange back in Roman times, this would have been one of those. So I thought those are kind of interesting. So Susanna says, excellent that your sister collects old coins. I love that. And Carson, you've got a gold coin from around the 1950s, and it used to be $70 or so, and now it's worth like $3,600. Yes, exactly. And we call that Gresham's law. When you take my economics class, we call that Gresham's law. Bad currency drives good currency out of circulation. If I've got, a 25-cent quarter from 2000 and something versus a quarter that actually has some silver in it from pre-1960, whatever, I'm going to save the one that has silver in it that actually has more street value, and spend the one that has the face value. So that's why we save these, and that's why they go up in value, because they actually have real precious metal in them versus just tokens. which is what our other money is. So we've gone through that. That was a little side. You're welcome. We've gone through kind of the big names in money. We've gone through the morality of money. We've gone through how is wealth made. Did we talk about the lottery? If we didn't, I think we talked about the lottery. I was thinking about you all this past week when the Powerball lottery made it all the way up to 1.6 or 1.8 billion dollars. And even with that fabulously incomprehensible amount of money, statistically speaking, people who win the lottery, who come into other kinds of windfalls, but don't have the financial foundations that we are going through, typically don't end up keeping that money. They end up spending it, losing it. It disappears. Money without a plan, that's where we're going today. Money without a plan tends to fly away. We're finding that as we go deeper into The Richest Man in Babylon, the same principle. If we don't have a plan for our money, when Lady Luck hits and blesses us, Lady Luck, right? When we get blessed with large amounts of money that we have not prepared for, that we don't have the foundations to manage well, somehow it all kinds of seems to go away. So that's where we're going today in terms of, I want you to be blessed with lots of resources. We've talked about why being blessed with lots of resources can be a good thing, and rich people are not evil, and it doesn't mean you won't be able to get into heaven if you actually make money. People with wealth, good people with wealth, can do amazingly good things. That's been where we've, the thing I've been hammering home for the last 3 weeks. Now we're going to jump in and start talking about how to. So first things first, before we do so, anyway, that's where we're going today, and we're just going to see where we get, because again, every week is an adventure with Mrs. Westcott. And I have already, by the way, been up and out and taken my mother to have a tooth extracted, and all the things. So we are like midday in Ms. Westcott's calendar timeline. So, bear with me, because you get what you get with me. Housekeeping and review. Number 1, expense tracking project. Is that due this week or is that due next week? I can't remember if that was due. I think today wraps up you should have had 4 2, 3. So it's due next week. Right? Because this is week 4. So week 1, 2, 3, 4. So we should be 3 weeks into that. Right. That's why we had the homework this past week. Where are you at and all that. So it's due next week-ish. Again, if you started late, Kai, I know you started the class late. Noah, I think you were missing the first week. So Kai, you started late, right? I think you were week 2. Right. Okay. Sorry. I said it out loud and then I second guessed myself. If you didn't start the homework the week, the day you joined, it's totally fine. Just do a 30-day increment from whenever you started it, and it'll be good. Okay. Especially because, Kaya, you haven't had a chance to watch the previous episode. You haven't gotten all the fun, yummy goodness of Miss Westcott. The exciting thing is, I think with the recording, you can speed it up. Not that you want to, because I already talk ridiculously super fast, right? But you could, you could slow it down even better and breathe through my craziness. Okay. So, any thoughts, questions on the homework so far? Particularly the spending project. Susanna, you know what? Let's talk about yours right now. You had started with tracking just yours with zeros because you're not interacting with money on a consistent daily basis, and that's totally fine. And then you started working, kind of mapping it to your family spending, but you're struggling with some of the homework questions related to that. That's okay. Either way, you're paying attention to the flow of money in your world, in your family's world. So you can adjust. You can either adjust the homework questions to be a little bit more relevant, or you can just go back to tracking yours. But I would continue doing, because yours is just zero, I would continue going ahead and continue to kind of pay attention and track your family's money flow to the extent that they are allowing you to do so, right? Because I think that will still give you good insight for other projects as we move forward. Okay. So, again, whatever, for all of you, this is for all of you, whatever the flow of money running through your hands makes sense, track that, answer the questions, the homework questions from last week, I guess, last week. Or no, the homework questions at the end of this project, as whatever comes up for you. So I'm a financial coach my primary career is helping people with their money. And a lot of times after we sit with our first session of, what are we spending? Where we start tracking our money, what are we spending our money on? Generally speaking, we get to about 3/4 of the way through our first session. And most of my clients have what I politely call an oh crap moment, which literally means, oh crap, we spend so much money. How can anybody afford to live when we actually look at how often we eat out and how much that costs, or what do we actually spend at the grocery store, or, gas, or going to the movies. And, we want to go to the concerts and all the things we do. Generally, about 3/4 of the way through our session, we get to this, oh my gosh, this is hopeless. This feels overwhelming. I can't believe we spend so much money. I can't figure out how we could spend any less money. It doesn't feel like we have enough money to live on. I don't feel like I spend that much money. Money always feels tight. And it is my job, literally my job, to help my clients pull out of that, to be able to say, okay, Sarah Scott's principle number 1, right? We can do anything we want with our resources. We just can't do everything. So within the context of our limited resources, such as they are, how do we prioritize the needs, the high priority wants, and the nice to haves, right? The needs, the wants, the nice to haves, in a way that makes us, that feels good, right? That's God honoring and feels good. But the point also is, I know where I was going with this, is that the homework out of that first session for all of these adult clients that I work with, 20 years old, adult, 25 years old, all the way up to 85. I work with some 85-year-old clients, is to marinate with your numbers, and really kind of like the homework questions that you have. You can, if those questions don't work, answer something similar. But I really want to, what comes up for you when you sit and look at how you're spending your money? What emotions come up? What thoughts go through your head? Oh my gosh, I spend too much money. And why is that too much? And then we can begin to explore the hidden assumptions that went into those judgments. I spend too much money. We spend too much money eating out. Well, what does too much money eating out really mean? What's too much money to eat out? Why do you think that's too much? Why is that not too much? So the homework questions, both for y'all right now and for my clients, are really to begin to uncover, what are my own internal judgments? What are your own internal judgments about how you spend your money, how you plan your money, how you save your money, how you give your money? I do check private messages to you, like in Schoology, or like text, Susanna. Or in Adobe Connect. I do within Schoology. I don't as frequently as I probably could or should. Oh no, I don't know how to do that on Adobe Connect. Oh, is that it? I have no idea. Nope, that's the help assistant. I'll have to learn how to do that. I didn't know that was possible. So, unless it comes up in my chat. Oh, it's at the top of the chat. Okay, we'll have to figure that out at some point there, because clearly I didn't realize that was a thing. I'm just, roadkill on the information superhighway. So I apologize. No, it must be a different tab, and I have not found it yet. So I will, I'll look for it at the break. I'll look for it, and then I'll be able to answer yes, right? Is my lighting going in and out, or is that just on my end? It seems like my lighting was going out there. Okay. Anyway, that was my soapbox, but that is also very much where we're going in terms of of why this project is important. Once we've gotten to the end of these 30 days tracking your initial spending and kind of what comes up for you through that process, then we're going to start talking about, okay, now how do we plan a little bit more intentionally? And that's where I take all of my clients too. Once we've got a sense of where do we think our money's currently going, and where would we like it to be going, then we actually map out a plan. And that's what we're going to start talking about today. I prefer calling it a spending plan. Spending meaning a broad term for how do we save and give and use our money. More commonly, however, we call it the dreaded B word, the budget. But sometimes that can have very strong emotions. You all may not be, you may or may not, depending on your family and your family's experience with budgeting, that may be a very difficult word. That may be a very emotionally charged word. In many families, not many, but I've worked with enough families where the budget was used to try and beat family members into submission, or control people. Beat them into submission is a little strong, but, to control people to what they want. And, well, it's not in the budget. It's not in the budget. And that's not how it is supposed to be. But some of you may come from families where it feels like that's very tight and constricting. So we're going to change that mindset over the next year here, starting today. Well, starting hopefully last couple of weeks, but definitely starting today. I want to change the mindset on how planning for our money doesn't have to be about control and shame and guilt. And if you don't already have those things, let's not start those things. But for many people over a certain age, we've got all of these negative emotions around how we manage money that we just need to wipe clean. Okay, cool. All right, how are we doing in the chat? Have I put y'all to sleep yet? Hopefully not. Any questions on the quiz? I have not actually opened it up and looked at it because I was at the dentist with my mother this morning. Any challenge with it? Did it work? Again, remember, I had to transfer all of my tech on Schoology to a new instance of Schoology and basically had to recreate it. So I'm hoping that the thing actually worked properly. Any surprises on that? Any concerns about that? I haven't even looked and see, how you did grade-wise. And if I did not mention, I don't do very many quizzes and tests throughout the year, but everything is pretty much project-based for this class. But again, I tend to curve. My basic assumption is if most of the class doesn't do well on a test or a quiz or a homework assignment, that's not because you're bad students. That's because I didn't either present it well or explain it well. So, my job is to make sure that you are successful. And to the extent that I'm not doing that part well, I'm not going to penalize you for doing poorly on a project or something. Okay, great. Okay, no questions on that. Nothing on the quiz. Last week's recap, we talked about the difference between wealth, meaning the things you own that have value, versus your income, which is what you exchange your time for, either in terms of a salary or for hourly wages, or investments that make money. Things that actually make money during a certain period of time are income, whereas wealth are the value of the things you own. We talked a little bit, I think, briefly about the farmers in England who are opposing a new property tax on their farms. Or is it property tax? It's income tax. Some kind of tax, inheritance tax maybe on farms. Which is really, potentially causing the end to family farms, because although they have wealth, the farms aren't actually making any income. And the only way to pay those taxes then would be to sell off the land to pay the taxes, because the farms are generating income. So again, I much prefer having taxes on, I prefer, when we talk about taxes later on in the year, this is a preview, I prefer having a consumption tax. I pay tax when I spend money. Like I said, like many of you live in states or places around the world. Suzanne, I don't know about y'all. But in the United States, many of you live in states that have some kind of a sales tax. In Georgia, we have an 8% sales tax, I want to believe. I think it's 8% right now. Which means every time I go to the store, with a few exceptions, so there's some food that's exempt, but everything else, if I go to the store and buy a $10 book, I'm going to pay an additional 80 cents. Yes, 80 cents of tax, sales tax. And in my mind, a consumption tax is generally more fair because those of us who have more income and more resources, more, not just income, but more resources, may spend more money. And so we'll pay more taxes based on the money we spend, as opposed to a flat rate on an income tax. Because certainly if I'm paying 12% on my income at $20,000 a year, and you're paying 12% or maybe even 25% on your $100,000, $150,000 income a year, the 12% I'm paying out of my $20,000 is a much bigger chunk of my overall income proportionally in terms of its buying power. Let's make it easy, 10%. So if I'm paying $2,000 out of my $20,000, that would be 10%, right? Yes. So if I'm paying $2,000 a year in taxes out of my $20,000 that I earn, that's $18,000 is not a lot left to live on when I need groceries and rent and utilities and a car and gas for the car. Whereas, $100,000 paying even $25,000 in taxes out of my $100,000 means I still have $75,000 left to live on. And that's still a whole lot more to be able to live on versus the 18 I have over here, even though we paid less percentage in taxes. Again, this is totally off topic, so let me move on. But I like a consumption tax. I don't know where I was going. Oh, the difference between wealth and income. I do not believe in taxing savings. That was my point. Taxing wealth, because a lot of times that it means having to sell the asset in order to pay the taxes. We talked about the characteristics of money, that it has to be small, easy to transport, light, have value, corrosion proof, something else there, right? And so this week we're going to start talking about SMART goals. Right. Oops. And that was a note to myself that I threw in there when I created this slide last year. There we go. So now you know. There we go. Let's talk about the richest man in Babylon. So hopefully we read this last week. Show of hands, virtual, in the chat, please. Any of you, hopefully you all had a chance to listen to, read the title short story, the title chapter from the book. That was, and again, interestingly, my version of my hard copy version, the page numbers are really out of whack. It goes from page 37 to page 88. I'm not quite sure at all. So, and again, even my PDF has really funky page numbers. So hopefully you're able to figure it out. Okay, Abigail, you looked up, that's very cool. You looked up Ohio sales tax is 5.75. So for every $10 you spend at the bookstore, you're spending additional 57.5 cents. So they probably rounded up. So you're spending an additional 58 cents in sales tax. Thank you for your contribution to the state's economy. And oh, good. Susanna, you really love the SMART goals video. I'm so glad we're going to come back to that. And Abigail, you thought the richest man in Babylon was super interesting. So Fred, you're jumping in. Nora, you are jumping into. Tell me a little bit more about what stood out to you with oh gosh, the liar and the charioteer, and I'm forgetting their names at the moment. I should just have it in here because I've how many times have I read the book? But oh, hang on, I've got it right here in front of me. All right. Kobe, and Banseer. Thank you. I was so close to it. Kobe and Banseer. I don't know why I have such a hard time, because I didn't name my children Kobe and Banseer, and I have a hard enough time remembering my children's name, right? Okay. Okay, so you're looking up sales taxes. I love that. Texas has a state sales tax rate of about 6.25. So for a $10 book, you're paying 63 cents, Fred, most likely. And Nora, you are, okay, New York though, Nora, I can't remember what part of New York you're in. You're upstate, correct? Because the city has sales tax as well as state. So when you go into Manhattan, for example, things can be really super expensive, not to mention just the tolls to get into Manhattan. Again, we got to keep the roads safe. We got to keep the Tappan Zee Bridge, up, and it's not Tappan Zee anymore, is it? Whatever, the Cuomo Bridge. We got to keep the bridges safe and tunnels safe, but still, it's like highway robbery. The cost of going into Manhattan, right? So I think New York City is like between 4.5 and 7%. Yeah, I haven't looked at it lately, but I do recall that we've got city tax and state tax, and we've got city income tax. I could be wrong about that, but I seem to remember that we had city and state and federal income tax. I could be really wrong about it. Maybe just sales tax. But yeah, kind of. What about, okay, so Kobe and Van Seer, and we've got the setting of the backstory of Arkad. So we've got Kobe and Ben Seer who've gone to Arkad, who was the richest man in Babylon. They all three went to school together, right? And they've decided, we're sick and tired of just getting by, of just making enough money to keep our family fed and clothed barely. But we live in the richest city in Babylon, and in all of Phoenicia. Babylon is the richest city in all of Phoenicia, and yet we're surrounded by all this fabulous wealth. Why don't we have any? And they compare themselves, good grammar, right, to Arkad, and say, we went to school with a guy. He was not any smarter. He was not any smarter than we are. He was not any more athletic than we are. He didn't, there's nothing special about him. So how is it that he got fabulously wealthy and we did not? And they allude to the fact that, he had some luck because what's his name? Elgash. Algamesh. I'm so close. Algamesh. I need to write them in here. Somebody remind me to put them in the slides after all these years, because I can never remember. Algamesh, found favor with Algamesh, and who ended up leaving him his fortunes. But as he pointed out in the end, it wasn't just luck. He didn't just win the lottery. It wasn't just like some rich uncle appeared out of nowhere and left him a lot of money. He did the foundations for those 4 years. I noticed that it was 4 years, kind of like a college degree in business, where between when he first met Algamesh and when Arkad first met Algamesh. And what happened that first year? He said, okay, I'll finish this project. I'll work all night. I'll work extra. Just tell me the secret of being wealthy. And what does Algamesh say? He says, in fact, the first thing, that, here's the secret to wealth. A part of all I earn is mine to keep. And so that was the first principle. That was the foundational principle. Keep some back. Pay yourself. You may hear it in modern languages, pay yourself first. The first part of what not necessarily the first part, because we are Christians. So the first part of what we earn generally goes to tithe. Whereas then the second part goes to savings. I'm going to keep back savings and investments. So I'm not going to spend all that I earn. Some of you may attend churches. You may have heard this before or maybe not, but this is something that if you've never heard this before this is today's topic, which is planning your money around something called the 10-10-80 rule. And some of you may have heard that in church sometime during the tithe messages and stuff, or the how to plan your money stuff, if you go to a church that talks about that kind of thing. 10-10-80 means set aside, if you make $100, set aside 10% of that, or $10 towards your charitable giving. You can always do more, but at least, here's the point. I've got a coach who says, when you're setting goals, use the words at least. Set aside at least 10% towards your charitable giving. Scripture talks a lot about charitable giving beginning at 10%, and that goes to the church, to the priests, basically, to the church that runs it. But then anything above and beyond extra blessings becomes your giving. So tithes and offerings become your offerings. Tithes are 10%, offerings are above and beyond that. But we want to balance that out with the at least part that makes sure everything else in your family is taken care of. So I'm not going to give 80% of my income to the church and other charitable opportunities and leave my family starving. So at least 10% goes to charitable giving. at least 10% goes towards paying yourself first. The part of all you earn, at least 10% is yours to keep. And that means put towards savings and then investment. We're going to talk a little bit here, well, we'll talk right now about the order of operations. Of that 10% that you keep aside, well, yeah, we'll come back to that. And then the other 80% is yours to be able to do whatever you want with and to live on, to pay, to keep the roof over your head and to keep the lights on and to be able to eat and be able to eat out and maybe to take vacations and go buy the cute shoes and the gaming system that you really want and the nicer car, or to be able to replace the tires on your car, or just have a battery so that the car runs. 80% of your income goes to all of the other life and lifestyle things that you want to do. 10% to giving, 10% to saving. Now, let's talk about that 10% that goes to saving, and then we'll come back to ARCOD. That first 10%, in the beginning, the very first savings goal you want to have, and this is, we're going to talk about this again in more detail in a couple of weeks, should be having something set aside for emergencies. Oh, gee, I don't have enough money in my car. We were in a major car accident, and the damages are more than I had set aside for repairing tires and such. Having an emergency fund will help you do that. Once you've got a basic emergency fund, then beyond that, taking those extra, the savings that you set aside out of each income, each piece of income that you get, paycheck or otherwise, can go towards building wealth. And that's where ARCOD got really excited about, right? So that first year, Algamesh gave him the one piece of advice: a part of all of mine is yours to keep. So set aside 10% for the year. And a year later, Algamesh comes back, and what had happened? ARCOD had followed the instructions, and he'd set aside, he'd built up a nice little purse of extra savings that he hadn't spent. And then he decided to invest it. But how did he invest it? Do y'all remember how he invested it? My glasses are dirty. One moment, please. There we are. Let's see. Right, in the bad jewels. Thank you, Abigail. Exactly. Right. So he gave his money to the baker. No, bricklayer, right? And the bricklayer, thank you, Fred. Good job. But the bricklayer didn't know anything about buying jewels and over in Phoenicia either. Actually, they're not in Phoenicia, they're in Babylon. But they went to Phoenicia to go buy jewels, but the bricklayer knew nothing about buying jewels, and he got swindled basically. So he lost his first investment. And what can we pull out of that particular lesson? Well, certainly we pull out of the lesson that, exactly what Algamesh said he should do, which was listen, take advice from people who know what they're doing. Take advice from people who have done what you want to do and who've got knowledge in the area. Dave Ramsey, for example, says you don't want to take mechanics advice from a shop teacher who's got missing fingers, right? You don't want to take financial advice from somebody who's particularly broke, or who spends it all on lottery tickets. I might not want to take, diet and exercise advice from someone who's morbidly obese, right? So taking advice, and granted, we want to love and respect parents and people of authority in our lives, but we can take their advice in terms of the care they want to give us without taking the specific advice if they don't have expertise in what it is we want to do. Get the advice and expertise from people who have done it. Right, exactly, right. Don't check Dr. Good. Carson, perfect example. Don't go to the hospital if you're sick just to talk to another patient instead of the doctor. Or, and don't go to Dr. Google instead of getting someone who has actual medical experience. Also, I'm probably not going to go to a foot doctor for issues about my brain if I'm having headaches. And, maybe the foot doctor can give me a little bit of information, but that's not his or her area of expertise. So go to someone who's got the expertise that you need. I'm not going to go to, you get the idea. I can beat that. So that was the first year. So the second year, what happens? He goes back and saves more. Oh, no, I'm sorry. The first year, I'm sorry. Oh, I was mistaken. The first year, he No. That was right. The first year he sent it on Jules. The second year, what happened? He invested it with somebody who knew what he was doing, right? The shield maker investing in the steel, the metal, the iron, whatever it was. And by giving the shield maker the money to buy the iron, he was getting paid back. So he basically made loans, and he was getting paid back quarterly for the investment that he was making. And so that was good. So he was investing his money well, but then he spent the earnings, right? And so he was having parties and getting himself nice clothes. Now, I want us all to have some nice things. So I'm not saying don't ever spend it, but what was Algamish's advice after that? Does anyone remember? I see Carson is typing. Carson, Abigail, and Fred are typing. Excellent. Kara and Nora, what are your thoughts in here? Susanna, Kaya, Noah. I'm just going to call y'all out there just to make sure y'all are like actively thinking about the question. You can all answer the same question. That is totally okay with me. Okay, so right. So Algamish said it's not necessarily that he was saying that don't spend it foolishly. That's true to a certain point, but again, judgment-free zone. He said don't spend it prematurely. And so he said, yes, he was being foolish by spending it prematurely. And that's the key differentiator there, Fred, right? It's not that the nice clothes and the parties were foolish themselves. It's that he was spending the money before he was actually making money on his money. And so Algamish's advice then was to go ahead and make sure the money babies were making money. He said it better than that, but make sure that the money that you're making is making money until you're making more money off of the interest than you are from the original investment, so to speak. And then there's going to be such an overflow, and that's going to keep flowing and flowing and flowing, that you can then begin to invest in nicer clothes, and nicer food, and maybe a nicer house, and a nicer car, and chariot in this case, and right, the gold slaves, as in the gold pieces have to be your slaves to make more gold, which in turn makes more gold. Excellent way to remind me. Thank you, Kaya. Right, and Susanna, you added in there, and all of you, Kaya. I love that. Thank you. So really good. So any questions on that so far? This week, at one point, I had thought that I'd had the next, that we'd already read 7 Cures for a Lean Purse, but apparently we had not. And so I have assigned that for this coming week, 7 Cures for a Lean Purse. And it's not terribly long. It's about 6 minutes in the audio, 6.5 minutes in the audio. And it's basically the overview of the subsequent longer short stories where we'll dig into each of the 7 principles. So you'll do that for this week, and we will talk about that next week. We've already had a slide on it, which is what made me think that maybe we'd already read it, but we have not, apparently. And here we go. All right, so we talked about money shopping last week, and again, for future years, it should be in this lesson and not the previous, although I assigned it week 1's homework. And again, flexibility with me. I assigned it for week 1 reading because I didn't want to overload you this week, but we didn't actually get to it, and we touched on it last week, and so I'm not going to touch on it again, but it really should be more related to this week's topic. Money doesn't go on trees, so we are literally buying and selling our time and talents. And good money management, the point of lesson number 1 here was that good money management gives us more money and more time for the important things in our lives. And so, as we talk through the arc of the year, which is how are we going to make money, not just how do we manage the money we have, but how are we going to make money? One of the determining factors is what's the most efficient way for us individually to decide to make the most amount of money in the most optimal way for what our family priorities are. So I just had this conversation with my mother this morning, who has been, I will, share my dirty laundry on camera, who has been sometimes in my lifetime less than enthusiastic about my life choices in terms of I quit a very high-paying job, in 1998 to raise babies. And, my mother was not very supportive of me being a full-time mother for many years. She was also not terribly supportive when I started my practice back in 2006, 6 to 8, somewhere in there. And certainly over the last decade or so, is not, feels like I should be going and working a traditional 9 to 5 job. Here's the thing. I have made very intentional decisions about how I choose to exchange my time and talents, for money, because I have other priorities in my life. Making $300,000 a year might be fun. Making $500,000 a year might be fun, but there might also be some sacrifices associated with that. And in my case, to go back to a corporate job making really, really, really big 6-figure income would also mean not having been able to be present raising my children. Would have also meant not necessarily being able to be present to take my mother to the dentist this morning. And as she ages and she gets older, our time together left, she's 85, is getting shorter and shorter, unless she lives to be Methuselah's age, right? And so the challenge is to find the income opportunities that work for you, whether it's self-employment that will give you lots of flexibility so that you can manage the time and your money the way you want to, or a traditional career, maybe that's, corporate, that has you traveling all over the world. My first job was I traveled all over the world for work, and that was lots of fun, but I didn't have children. Or maybe it's a remote job where you are able to work at a desk from home, or maybe it's something that's physical, like dog walking or park ranger or whatever those are. So as we get to the arc of how do we earn our income, it's important to have the foundation of what are our values. Remember, on our first week, we talked about, our values and our priorities, not morally good or bad, right or wrong, just what's important to us, and make sure those are all in alignment when we start thinking about income. Okay, let's see where we're going to go. Let me talk about impulse fact sheets here for 2 minutes, and then we're going to move right on into the meat of it and get through the rest of it in the second half. But impulse fact shopping tip, and this is kind of a weird place to put it, but I didn't know where else to put it as I was reworking all of the curriculum this year. But I want you to know this, because money that we don't have a plan for in advance disappears. Here's why. 88% of all impulse purchases are made because the item is on sale. Ooh, it's a really good deal. This shirt is on sale. Those cute shoes are on sale. I'm getting a deal. The reality, however, is that the best way to get the best deal of all, to save 100% by not purchasing in the first place. So I'm all about shopping wisely and shopping for deals and saving the money so that when a sale comes up, I can take advantage of the sale. But it's not a deal if I wasn't planning on buying it in the first place. So, but most of impulse purchases are because items are on sale. Ooh, it feels like a good deal. It feels like a good exchange. But if it's an impulse and I wasn't planning on spending it, and particularly if I didn't have the money to spend it, money set aside to spend it, then that's a problem. Households with young unmarried adults with higher incomes, I see this all the time, spend 45% more unplanned buying than older married households. So like my mother and her husband, at this point, older married households, they do less impulse, unplanned buying because they're kind of set in their ways. Young families, probably some of yours, do a lot more unplanned buying because things come up. The kids grew and their shoes no longer fit. And oh, gee, Johnny decided he just wanted to do basketball. And so we have to sign up and get all the equipment for basketball. So we do a lot more unplanned, which means it is that much more important. I am literally working with a client right now who make, oh gosh, more than many families make. They make per month more than many families make in a year. And they are struggling because they have all of these, because they've got a bunch of young kids. And there's a lot of expenses, unexpected expenses, school expenses, things are unplanned. And that's exactly what we work on. And impulse shoppers usually buy because they feel angry, stressed, guilty, or bored. I'm hungry, so I go shopping. I'm angry, or life feels overwhelming. So we need to pay attention to our emotions. And again, when we have a plan for our money, we can, instead of going through the drive-through because I'm tired and it's been a rainy, long day, I can skip the drive-through and come home and cook the chicken nuggets that are in my freezer already. When people shop with the purpose of buying immediate needs or forgotten items, the rate shop with purpose of buying immediate needs or forgotten items, the rate of compulsive buying falls by 53%. So again, shopping with a plan, we're less likely to impulse shop, drops by half. If I don't have a plan, and I'm just going into the store, the grocery store, by the way, specifically has laid out the aisles and they plan the music that they play and the lighting to keep us in the store as long as possible, because the longer we're there, the more we browse and meander and the more shelves we have to look at, the more Doritos and candied apples and I really wanted to try that soup ends up in our cart, right? So go with a plan, go with a purpose, and our impulse buying will go down. Now I'm all about a little bit of impulse buying, but I also believe in I have a separate envelope for impulse purchasing. And if there's money in the impulse purchase envelope, I call that the mad money envelope. If there's money in the mad money envelope, then I can still impulse purchase without hurting the rest of my plan. But I can't just go and impulse purchase without knowing where the money is coming from. Aha, exactly. That's I agree. I like ordering online too, except sometimes my brain doesn't remember what I need. So sometimes, yes, I do actually need to be in the grocery store to remember that I need something. But the more I do online and then just go into the store for, I forgot I needed olives or capers for the lemon piccata chicken that I'm making, I can go in just for the capers. Right. Yeah. Every time I leave the house, it costs me money. Actually, that's a quote from one of my clients, but it's true. Every time she leaves the house, she's gone. She's going to go through a drive-through. So just stay home, or go for a walk, or eat before you go. All those things. All right, let's go ahead and take our break because it is 11:48 my time. We'll take a quick break. I will look for the messaging thing here that I'm supposed to find, Susanna, and I'm going to reheat. Actually, I haven't hardly drank it, but I'm going to reheat this, and we will move on after the break. And you can talk about books or whatever you want to do while we're breaking. I'm recording. Particularly, we are resuming recording because I know Kaya would be very, very sad. And I would not want to have to sit here and do it again, much as I love the topic. Okay, so we are moving into this idea of SMART goals and managing our money. That is today's topic, the idea of planning our budget, our money. Introduction to spending, because we're finishing the tracking of kind of getting a sense of where our money has been going so far, if anywhere. And now we're going to start the next section of how do we be proactive with it. So good money management involves setting financial plans. Typo. So we need to have some short-term goals, some intermediate term goals, and some long-term financial goals. Now, I know at 16, 17, 15, 18 years old, y'all, it's sometimes hard to think about retirement and what do we want to do when we're 65, 75, 85 or older. But doing a little bit of planning now and a little bit of thinking about that now means we will not have to go and work at Walmart when we are 75 years old. If you need company and you need to be out meeting people and being engaged, you can go volunteer at any number of other places without having to go be a greeter at Walmart if you have money to do so. So the idea of having money when you're old is not because it's so that you have choices. So you have choices about how you spend your time. And you could go travel the world with other aging adults rather than go stand in a Walmart to be greeter, just to have interaction. Okay. So setting some short-term goals for what do we want in the next, 6 months to a year. Intermediate goals might be, 1 to 5 years, or it might even be 5 to 10 years. And then long-term goals would be things like thinking about saving for buying your first home, or sending your kids to college someday, or buying a vacation because you want to have not just a regular home, but you also always want to be able to think about, I want to be able to buy that cabin on the lake as a vacation place. I want to be able to keep the family vacation home that we've had for generations and not have to sell it. And so making sure we've got, I'm saving money to be able to buy the place and make sure I can save the place. Whatever those short, intermediate, and long-term goals are, we need to have some. And that's where our money needs to be thinking about. So when we think about financial goals, we definitely think about what we want, and then think about a plan for how do we achieve it. There is no right answer. Some of you may want a second vacation home. Some of you want to be able to buy a boat. Some of you maybe want to buy the boat that you live on full time and do the Great Loop. Or if you live in other parts of we don't have them much here in the United States, but in England, I would love to live on one of the river boats, canal boats, and travel the canals of England or Europe for that matter, and do that. So think about what you would like. Or I've got a very dear friends who live in an RV permanently and an Airstream. And sometimes they stay in one location for a while and sometimes they're traveling around, but that's what they want for their life. So when you set your financial goal, you design what it is that you want and then develop whatever the plan is to how do we make that happen. And there's 3 ways to do that. Manage your spending, earn more income so that you're saved some, earn more income so you have more to save, or a combination of those 2 things, right? And so we talked about they're short term up to 3 months, intermediate term, 3 months to a year, and long-term goals over a year to achieve. Okay. So I would say that this is good for our teenage years, but beyond that, I like thinking a little longer than just over a year to achieve. I mean, at 15, 16, 18 years old, over a year feels like a really long time to save. What was it? Aaron, my number 3 child, saved for a good long time. I want to say at 13, 14 years old, saved for probably a year for their first computer. And this is before they had a full-time job, but they were, making money and Christmas money, and they were doing tours. And I think they, were raking leaves or doing some other, not paycheck related jobs, but enough to make some money, saved up to buy their computer. And that was a really long-term goal for them at 13 years old. And then the tragedy with that was that it was a laptop, and it was this very specific laptop that they'd saved for, and I don't know, may have cost, I don't remember what it cost, $1,300, $1,600. I can't quite remember. Maybe it wasn't that much. I can't remember. But she'd had the computer probably less than a month, and getting out of her dad's car on coming home from a weekend, tripped, and the laptop was in her backpack and it smashed. And the devastation of this kid who had saved and worked so hard for this computer, and it was just broken. And Dad in the heat of the moment said, "Oh, we'll help replace it." But in the end, it wasn't in their budget either to do so, and it wasn't Dad's fault. And poor Erin, I am so proud of her to this day. She dusted herself back off and picked herself up and saved again. And in actually less time, this time managed to save to replace that computer. But that can only be done when you have goals and you are almost single-minded to it. She did not go and buy the soda at McDonald's when her siblings went to go do so. She did not buy the latest video games. She was very careful with how she did gift giving because she was saving money for this computer. And it was a very, very, very big deal. So, for your teenage years, short term could be up to 3 months, intermediate term could be 3 months to a year, and long term could be over a year. As we get older, our timelines expand. I'd say short term is a 1 to 3 year, medium term is 3 to 5 or 3 to 10, and then long term is over 10. But you do you. It doesn't really matter that much. You do you. Just you got to have some of each, because if all we're doing is the really, really, really long term goal, and I'm only saving for retirement, and that's 45 years away, that's not enough motivation. You need to be able to do some things now too, and save for some things now, like cars and buying a house and other things you may want to do. So the process of, whoopsie, one of these years I will take out all of these timing things. Every year I say that, and I just don't. So the process of planning your finances, not to be confused, by the way, there is a career called financial planners. And when we talk about financial planners or certified financial planners, CFPs, Those are professionals who've taken exams and have various licenses to invest money on your behalf in the stock market or otherwise. CFPs often have certified financial planners often have additional training to make sure that that they're looking at your life insurance needs and, your long-term financial picture. That's not what we're talking about here. So when we're talking about financial planning in this context, we're just talking about planning your money. You sitting down and planning what it is you want to have happen with your money. A couple of pieces. Assessment is the first piece of that. Tracking your income and expenses. We've not been tracking your income yet, but we're going to start with that. Been tracking your expenses. Assessing where are we at? What are we doing? What does life and lifestyle look like for you? Then it's setting goals. What is it that matters to you moving forward? I want to be able to go out to the movies with my friends when I want to do that. Downton Abbey movie's coming out this week. I'd love to be able to go to Downton Abbey movie. And, I want to just not go to the theater, but I'd like to be able to buy, the jumbo size popcorn and the big drink and what I don't even know what candy. I haven't been in the movie theater in so long. I have no idea. But again, I understand from my clients that is a really expensive thing. So if that's something that's important to you, then we want to make sure that you're setting goals to put money into the categories of entertainment, of clothing, particularly if there's clothing that mom and dad won't buy for you. I also want you thinking about what are your expenses going to be? What do you think they're going to be after we leave mom and dad's house? Now, some of you may stay for quite a while. I've got a 24-year-old and a 20-year-old who still live at home. But here's the thing. They are also contributing as if they were living with friends in their own apartment. They contribute here and they pay a portion of they pay rent to me. They pay for utilities. They pay for their own car insurance and their cell phone plan. We're still on a shared cell phone plan, but they pay for their part. So I need you thinking that beyond 18 years old or beyond when you graduate from high school, what are the additional expenses that you need to start thinking about now? Not just saving for a car, but where are you going to live and how much is it going to cost? What about the utilities for those things? And set goals about, again, you may not know what those are. We're going to talk about that throughout the year, right? We're going to plan for that throughout the year. But setting goals for starting to save some money for future expenses once you launch. And then we're going to have a detailed plan that's called our budget or our spending plan on how we're going to accomplish that. When income comes in, where does it go? Where do we put it? We put it into an envelope, a virtual and physical or spreadsheet envelope that says X amount of the dollars that I have are meant to be saved in an envelope called savings. X amount of the dollars that I have are going into my charitable givings. And the next time I go to church, I'm taking those dollars and putting them in the plate or doing the electronic transfer or whatever I do. X amount of dollars are saving for, the new tires for my car. Or in my case, it's the windshield. Did I tell you I have a cracked windshield? I'm very upset about it. So X amount of dollars are going into my virtual envelope called car repairs, so that when I have the money, I can take the money and go buy the new windshield so that I am legal on the road again. Then the next piece of that is action and execution, actually moving the money to savings if I need to move it to savings, actually paying the bills when I need to pay the bills, whatever that looks like, doing the things that I said I was going to do with my plan and not doing the things that I said I wasn't going to do with the plan, like not blowing my money that I was saving for the windshield on a trip to Las Vegas. Although I have done a spontaneous trip to Las Vegas before, and that was really awesome and wonderful. But, again, I have a separate bucket for impulse stuff, which could include, in this case, did include impulse travel for a concert to the Rolling Stones, first row. I mean, how can you pass that up, right? Like literally, we were right there. It was awesome. None of you even know who the Rolling Stones are, I'm sure. Because I'm old, but maybe you do. And it was really awesome. Let me just tell you, it was exciting. And then, so the last piece of that is regularly monitoring and reassessing your financial plan. It is no good whatsoever to create a spending plan if you don't ever look at it and ever track it. Most of the, right, it's like having a diet plan and then not actually tracking it, not actually, is it working? Is it not working? One of the things I do with my clients regularly is this idea that, again, we get to the end of the first session and or the 3/4 of the way through the first session, and it's this, oh crap, how can we afford to live moment? But by the end of the session, the homework is to marinate with the numbers And what are they telling you? How do you feel about the numbers? But there's two things that come out of that. At the end of our first session, we generally have a sense of here's how much income we bring in per month. Here's, all else being equal, life fully funded, here's how much we would be spending per month. Here's how much we would be spending per month. And does it balance? Because again, we are not the government. We cannot spend more than we make. So the first question is, does it balance? Are we keeping, not just in terms of the overall numbers, but in terms of the individual numbers? How much do we say we were going to spend on eating out versus how much are we actually eating out? How much did we say we were going to spend on clothing versus how much are we actually spending on clothing or video games or groceries or whatever else? Doesn't matter, right? And so over time, we begin to say, this is what we said we were going to spend. This is what we're actually spending. Are we on track? But then there's this piece of the regularly monitoring that matters, is that if it doesn't match, there's two questions. Are we overspending? Do we need to reduce our spending? Do I need to forego some of those extra eating out meals, some of those extra snacks? Or was it just not a realistic number? And do I need to increase the budget number, the spending plan number, because it costs what it costs? Groceries are just cost more than they used to. So if I still plan on $50 a month for groceries, the plan could be great, but it's not realistic. And I spend $75 each week, not just each month, but each week, then I probably need to realize that the best I can do is $75 a week. So I'd better go ahead and bump this monthly budget up from $50 a month to $300 a month, because that's more realistic. So the idea of monitoring and assessing your plan is to say, was this a good plan? Is it realistic? And is my behavior matching the way I said it would? Do you see those two parts there? Okay, excellent. At least Abigail is still. Whoops, did I get back to the beginning? Oh, no, number 9. Okay, good. All right, we are cruising right along. We're doing fine. So this idea of SMART goals, when we set goals for what do we want to accomplish, SMART goals is very 1980s still, 1990s still, but there's still relevance to it. You may find on the internet that people are like thumbing their noses at this idea of SMART goals, but there's still some good stuff, good nuggets in this. I want to buy a car is very generic, and it's not specific enough for me to be able to say I'm working towards this goal. Working towards is not specific. So the idea of SMART goals is, number one, specific. Exactly what it is you wish to buy or accomplish with the money you want to save. In this case, I want to buy, a less than 5-year-old Toyota convertible. Making that up, right? So let's not go with Toyota. Let's go with a Porsche. I'd rather have, or a BMW convertible. Let's go with the BMW convertible today. That's what I feel like today. So I want to buy a less than 5-year-old BMW convertible with a soft top, silver and black, right? So I'm being specific about what it is I'm looking for. Number one, that helps me visualize it and helps me know exactly what to look for and know how much I need to plan for, what that's going to cost versus just I need a new car. It also means that I can tell other people that I'm looking for a less than 5-year-old, a 2020 or above BMW convertible. I don't care which kind, but I'm looking for a BMW convertible, silver, soft top, black. You all can start looking for that now for me too, right? It's measurable. Therefore I can indicate the exact dollar amount that I need to accomplish the goal. I know that car is going to cost me $20,000. I'm making this up. I have not looked. I'm not in the market for a BMW right now, but I know what it is I'm looking for. I can measure how I'm doing along that. I know that I have, $3.11 saved towards my $20,000 goal of this car. Is it attainable? A SMART goal has to be attainable. I have to actually be able to do that. And if I can only save $3.11 per month, it's going to take me a heck of a long time to save up that amount of money. It may not be attainable. On the other hand, if I readjust other things in my spending plan, and maybe I go out and sell some more services, sell a best-selling consumer math course that, everybody in America wants to go buy and become the next, money guru, then all of a sudden that is attainable. So again, I assess whether the goal is actually doable, reasonably doable. It has to be relevant. It has to be meaningful to me, or you may not stick with the plan. Honestly, for me right now, the goal of a BMW convertible might not be as relevant to me as the fact that I need something that doesn't have a crack in the windshield that gets me from point A to B. So maybe I need to redefine my goal to something that's actually more urgent to me than the dream car. I don't want to give up on the dream car goal, but maybe that's a longer term goal. And right now, the short term SMART goal is the windshield. Specifically, I want to buy a windshield for my current car. I know that I need $600. I'm guessing that I need $600 to replace that windshield. That is absolutely attainable. I know how much I have to work or how much I have to save or how to come up with that $600 to be able to do that. That is attainable. It is relevant. It is very meaningful to me because I do not want to get pulled over for having a ticket and get a ticket for having a cracked windshield. Right? And time bound, number 5 part there, the T part is time bound. It has to have a deadline. A goal without a deadline is just a wish. And so I want to have this done in the next, by the end of September. That should give me enough time to make the money, spend the money, and for them to do the work. And hopefully not give me a ticket in the 3 weeks between now and then. Right? Okay, there we go. So that concept of SMART goals means, and there's an example here. I forgot. I have the example here. I plan to save for a car purchase, right? And this is not as specific as I would like it to be. I plan to save $3,000 for a down payment. That's a great measurable goal. I'm not going to spend the full $20,000, but I'm going to save $3,000 for the down payment. And then I'll have a car payment after that. Okay. How can I do that? I can save $100 a month from my babysitting job. It's my paycheck. From yard work that I do in the neighborhood. We talked last week about the garbage can, dragging garbage cans, getting $2 a week from all the neighbors to bring garbage cans to the street on garbage day. And we almost missed ours this morning. And I thought about that because both kids brought garbage out to the garbage bin last night and forgot to actually drag, and we talked about it, forgot to actually drag the bin to the street. Thankfully, I was out early enough to get the bin to the street. But we did, anyway, you can make money that way. It is relevant. You want to own a car because it'll help you get to work in other places you want to go. And because maybe where you live, there isn't public transportation, or because it is not convenient to expect mom and dad or older siblings to drive you the places you want to go. Because I can't work and I can't get to jobs without having reliable transportation. And if I save $100 a month, that's going to take me how long? I'll save $3,000 in 30 months or 2 years and 6 months. Which may, I've still got a typo in there, which may still seem like a long time. So what can I do? And I look at that and say, okay, I can do $3,000 in the next 2 years, 2.5 years. Or maybe I could save $200 a month and cut that down to a year. Or maybe, find some other ways, or maybe I can get someone to finance that. So I don't have to wait that long. Okay, we're cruising along. So financial goals are achieved with a budget or a spending plan, which is an estimation of your income and your expenses, the spending plan estimate. It's the plan. Remember, it's not actual yet. It's the plan of your income and expenses over a specified future period of time. It reflects the ability of accomplishment specific. That doesn't even make sense. Okay, typo again. It reflects your ability to accomplish specific to, I think it meant to be to accomplish specific financial goals. Right. So a typical budget is, for a month or a year broken down into months. I like tracking based on a month. And I like tracking, the 1st to the 31st, but tracking on 4-week increments so that we can say in any given month, we're going to have 4 paychecks because we get paid once a week, or we're going to have 2 paychecks because we get paid, every other week. And recognizing that there's going to be some months where there's going to be a 3rd paycheck or a 5th paycheck, but we're going to plan our spending around a calendar month. You don't have to. I have some clients who've actually, plan their spending around the 15th to the 15th because they get paid once a month. And so they plan all of their spending from the day they get paid till the next day they get paid, even though it's not a month, even though it's not a calendar month. There we are. A detailed summary of anticipated and planned expenses. It's a tool to control your money. Hear me say that again. It is the tool to control your money. Whoopsie. Not to control you. The budget shouldn't be beating you up or trying to control you. It should be your tool. You're in charge to control where your money goes. It's also your financial mirror. An anonymous quote, a longstanding old quote that we don't know, maybe Ben Franklin: show me a man's checkbook or his financial records, his online banking ATM balance, right? And his calendar, and I'll show you his values. So between where we spend our money and where we spend our time, that represents our values. And if we don't like what we see, we need to change both, either or both. The function of our spending plan, of our budget, is to prioritize what's important to you and then to allocate your resources to get the best out of that income. It's also designed to plan for the unexpected. I heard a really interesting statistic this week that more homeowners right now are getting into trouble because the cost of major home repairs have skyrocketed. I've got a client right now who's just paid $35,000, or is financed because they didn't have the money set aside, $35,000 for a new roof and siding on their house. And they've also paid, I think, I want to say 12 or 15. I think about 15, I think, if I remember correctly, on a new HVAC air handler, like within a 6-month period. Now, they've been in the house long enough that they should have and could have, and maybe I shared this with you last week, could have and should have been saving money, every month because, you live in a house, roofs don't last forever. They have a 20-year, many of them have a 20 to 30-year timeline. They may be guaranteed for 30 years, but they often start going before then. So you got to be prepared. And if we're not setting aside money for the big things on home maintenance, and we're spending everything else that we make, then we're going to get caught unprepared when the big things come up. And so we're seeing lots of people borrow money on the equity of their homes, which is kind of setting up a financial crisis could be similar to what we saw 15 years ago in the mid-2000s, 2008. 20 years ago almost. Gosh, that's just scary to me. So here's the thing. So we want to have, so we have a plan for our priorities, and we have a plan for our emergencies, things that come up that are unexpected. And then the long-term things that are expected, but just long-term. The roof is not unexpected. The timing of it may be unexpected, but the fact that it's going to have to be replaced at some point is not unexpected. The fact that the hot water heaters go out occasionally and that windows have to be replaced, periodically. It's not unexpected. It's just the timing is unexpected. Okay, so why do we need to budget our plan? Because it helps us identify our current patterns and establish the priorities. It helps to, I put this in here on purpose. We don't actually eliminate impulse buying, but it helps us manage impulse buying. And it allows us, if we do it right, to still have a mechanism, a release to do impulse buying, but managed, within a context, within boundaries that protect you. And it enables you to decide in advance where your money goes, control and organization. And as you can see here, we've got the picture of, I give myself permission. Your budget, your spending plan should be your permission slip, not the handcuffs. The budget is the thing that says, I am allowed to go out to eat today guilt-free. I am allowed to go buy that video game guilt-free because I have the money in that envelope, in that category to go spend. And I'm not going to accidentally spend the money that should have gone towards paying my car loan. A lot of people have this idea that the budget is a set of handcuffs. It means I'm saying no to everything. No, in fact, it means you're saying yes to the things that are most important to you. It's a permission slip to say yes to the things that are most important to you. It's easier to say no to the lesser important things when you're saying yes to the most important. Again, it doesn't prevent, but it reduces potential conflicts with spouses, partners, parents, loved ones, about how to spend and save the money. When we have a plan, it reduces the amount of conflict in the moment, and it promotes open conversation about finances. So when you have a good spending plan, you can communicate about it and you can get on the same page together. I take a lot of my clients who are married through exercises of what's important to him, what's important to her. Let's create a plan that we can both live with and be enthusiastic about. And it's a step towards your comprehensive long-term goals. How do we want to make sure that we get to age 30 and get to buy our first house, or get to age 40 and maybe can have some choices about how much I work because I've saved money and made money, and I can be home with kids and we can travel when our kids are teenagers and enjoy life together a little bit more. So what does the Bible say about budgeting? And we'll wrap up here very soon. It says, for which of you, desiring to build a tower, does not first sit down and count the cost, whether you have enough to complete it? Otherwise, when he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it will begin to mock him, saying, that man began to build and was not able to finish. So Bible talks a lot about planning and budgeting, planning for all the aspects of your life. Count the costs. So here are some of the expense categories that we want to start thinking about. I'm going to wait till next week to actually present to you the tool that we're going to use. So Susanna, probably to your question, I had maybe thought that we would do it this week, but I'm going to wait a little bit longer because we haven't finished the first money tracking project. So I'm going to introduce the tool for the next long-term project after we finish this one. Okay. But yes, you can text me after class, or you can just stay on and come off mute. I will stop recording. We can just talk if you want to, or you can text me, either way. I could not find the other chat way to do that, but that's fine. So these are the categories I want you to think about as we introduce this concept. 10, 10, 80. So we want to do some spiritual giving or other contributions, or charitable gifts of some kind. 10% towards saving, and then potentially long-term saving, which we call investing. And then you want to start thinking about your costs for basic food, for keeping a roof over your head of some kind, whether that's an RV or a boat or that you live on, or an apartment or a house. What it's going to cost to maintain and to live there with electricity and internet and water and sewer. You definitely want water and sewer because you don't want to be pooping in an outhouse in the river or in the river, right? Or in the woods. Transportation, if you're not living on your houseboat, you need a car, a truck, whatever. Costs to pay for your health insurance and or health care. And then all of your discretionary, your personal care, for those of us who like wearing makeup and special hair stuff, or, whatever, that kind of stuff, personal care, massages, things like that. Entertainment, concerts, movies, all your subscriptions, Hulu subscriptions, all those kind of things. If you've got those, books, fiction, all those kind of things. Education, if you need to save for your own education or for someone you love, and then any of the miscellaneous. So those are your major categories right now. The tool we're going to use has more than that, but these are the ones we're going to start paying attention to. And then last but not least, as we wrap up today, different kinds of expenses. There are going to be things called fixed expenses. Let me come right in. Oopsie. Oh, darn. There we go. Fixed expenses are generally the kind of things that stay the same over a long period of time. Like my cell phone bill is pretty much a fixed expense. It's always the same. Things don't change. My rent payment is always the same. My electric bill could be fixed because I could be on budget planning. It happens to be a little bit variable, but I consider it more of a fixed expense because I have to pay it. I can't not pay it. It's mandatory. I know that minimum food expenses, I can make it absolutely I can actually make it with about $50 a week if I really, really, really needed to. So those are my fixes. I need to make sure I've got enough money set aside available for my fixed expenses, the things that I cannot do without. Everything else is considered variable expenses or discretionary expenses. Variable expenses mean they rise and fall depending on the change of income. My entertainment, my vacation, things that go up and down depending on use. So electric could be considered a variable expense because it can change month over month. But generally speaking, because it's a necessary expense, I put it up under the fixed. Whereas, again, variable are the things that I can spend more when I've got it, or I don't spend it when I don't got it. So you'll want to know those two terms. And then I think the last is a quote, personal finance tips. It's not, when we talk about budgeting, it's not always the big things. Beware of death by 1,000 cuts. A lot of times when I work with clients, it's not that they have big over expenses. It's they do too much of a lot of little things. And you can't dig yourself out of a hole by borrowing more money. If you dig deeper in your hole, you're just going to go deeper in the hole. So we don't borrow more money to try and get ourselves out of debt. And yes, you always want to make sure your spending plan has room for fun. You need some mad money. You need some just blow off steam money. And that's it. Telling your money where to go, make your money happen. You'll have some. If you don't, you won't. Zig Ziglar, people who blend them. All right. So for this week, there's just a couple of homework items. There is a SMART Goals homework assignment in Schoology. There's a bunch of videos to watch. We did not actually talk about the videos at all. I apologize, Susanna. I meant to talk about the SMART videos and completely forgot. My bad. We'll do that next week. Okay. And we'll start on into banking. So we're going to talk about the practicalities of the banking system. Anything else as you depart the room? Till next week. Susanna, you can hang out if you'd like to. Abigail, Kara, you guys are good. All right. So with that, have a fabulous week, you all, and I will see you anon. And I will hang out here a little bit longer if you've got anything you want to talk about. Where's my backstage? There's my backstage. There it is. All right. See y'all. All right. There we go. Bye now. I see ya. Okay, so right, I can't remember off the top of my head, Susanna. Let me hit stop recording.